Julian Hohne. A fisherman's job is one of the most challenging jobs that can transform the journey into a fantastic adventure, and sometimes a nightmare. 7-year-old Julian Hohne was very excited as his father told him he would go fishing today with his friend Stephen on the waters off Queensland's Sunshine Coast and wanted him to join them on the journey. Julian was thrilled, as fishing was his passion and he often practiced fishing at home. In June 2020, Julian, his dad, Maiki, and Stephen Giacock had set out on the journey. Julian loved the blue waters and was amazed to see fish swimming around the boat. It was one of the most exciting journeys of his life. They cast their lines 14 kilometers off the Caloundra coast. The day went pretty well, and they got to catch a lot of fish. After several hours of fishing, the three planned to sleep overnight on the boat. Maiki set the anchor, had a quick feed, and laid down next to Julian. All three of them were very tired, so within seconds they were asleep. While they were sleeping, the anchor rope got tangled around the outboard's propeller. The rope caused the rear of the tinny to be dragged underwater. The boat shook and water began to fill in. Maiki and Stephen woke up but were shocked to see that they were about to drown in the water. Maiki knew he needed to take quick action before it was too late. He quickly grabbed the radio and called the Coast Guard on Channel 16, which they kept on whenever they went on a journey. They had life vests, flares, and a lot of emergency equipment on the boat, but they never got a chance to use them. Suddenly, the boat's pitch rolled down and sank within a few seconds. Maiki and Julian were standing right on the side of the boat when the boat flipped over. They were trapped inside the upturned boat beneath the canopy, going down with the boat in the darkness of the cold Pacific Ocean. It was dark all around them, and Maiki was worried about Julian. Julian could not keep his head above the water, so Maiki held him up to avoid drowning. They were in the cold water for the next hour and could not find any support in the dark. The chilly cold water was freezing. Suddenly, Maiki spotted 2 buckets floating on the surface. Maiki quickly swam towards the buckets, which were upside down and filled with air. He wanted to use the buckets to support his son and himself. Maiki was panicking. He was worried about Julian. The 7-year-old calmed his father. He said, "It will be all right, Dad." He pointed towards Caloundra and said, "We just have to swim that way, Dad." Maiki held Julian higher and helped him get a little support from the bucket. Maiki remembered that before the boat sank, he grabbed his phone. Stephen used it to call 000. The call triggered a full-scale rescue effort covering a large area of the ocean. Bill Asher, the Mululaba Coast Guard volunteer, received the signals. He quickly initiated a team search. Asher thought the fishing spot could be anywhere in the area. They could be in 10 or 15 square miles of anchorage. The wind was up to 20 knots, blowing huge waves. Julian was swallowing more and more water. Maiki came in front of him so the waves couldn't hit him and he would take an easy breath. Julian was a brave kid. Despite sinking in the water, he kept blowing off water from his face, but his face remained wet all the time. Maiki and Stephen were worried not only about the little kid, but also about the species living in the water. While fishing, they caught an 80-kilogram shark in the same area. They knew it was a danger zone and an attack could occur at any time. Both stayed awake all night while Julian was unconscious in his dad's arms. By daybreak, Julian and the other 2 fishermen had been in the water for more than 4 hours. Julian was in terrible shape, constantly dipping in and out of the water. He wasn't speaking and remained quiet. Maiki was trying to wake him up, but he wasn't responding. He was breathing but seemed lifeless. Seeing his condition, Maiki decided that if his son stopped breathing today, he would let the bucket go. He would leave the world with his son. Paramedic Elliot Bates was a part of the rescue crew. After hours of searching, he encountered tiny heads amongst the waves' white caps. Maiki was on the verge of letting the buckets go because he could see his son's lifeless body. Just then, he heard the sound of a helicopter in the distance. Mikey quickly looked around. The noise had increased. It was coming from a cargo ship. The bulk carriers also noticed 3 people in the water and started moving towards them. Stephen began to wave through the water. The chopper flew and stopped right above them. When the rescuer was descending from the chopper, Mikey began to shout, "Just take my boy! Get him out of here!" Finally, all 3 were rescued after 6 hours of staying in the water. Julian was hardly breathing. He received CPR before reaching the hospital. After a few signals of breath, all 3 of them were rushed to the hospital suffering from exposure and dehydration. Queensland Children's Hospital feared Julian would suffer permanent brain damage because Julian had gone into a coma. Mikey and his wife Susan Cork were praying for his life. These were one of the most challenging moments of their lives. Doctors told them to prepare for the worst as Julian had difficulty coming out of the coma. Julian was slowly letting go of life. He had no idea that his loved ones were waiting for him to smile once and tell them that he was fine. Mikey regretted his decision to take him out to the sea. But his wife told him that it was Julian's dream to see the blue water. Mikey cried bitterly. He tried his best to save his son, but Julian going into coma was a signal that he won't survive. Just then, doctors and nurses ran into the emergency room. Mikey and Susan looked at them in fear. Their hearts began to sink. They felt like the world was about to go upside down. Nurses were going in and out of the emergency ward, but they weren't giving the parents any response. Mikey looked at the emergency room doors and closed his eyes. He prayed for his son's long life. Just then, he saw the doctor coming out of the doors. The doctor looked very serious while he was walking towards him. Mikey's heart began to sink. He wasn't ready to hear it. The doctor stopped in front of Mikey. The next thing Mikey heard brought a tear to his eyes. The doctor had told Mikey that after 18 hours in a coma, Julian woke up and was doing great. It was a miracle that he came back to life. Mikey ran into the emergency room and saw Julian smiling. He hugged him tightly. He was so happy to see his son safe. Julian completely recovered from his ordeal. Julian, his dad, and Stephen applaud the brave team who came to their rescue. The rescue crew member Elliot said this miraculous tale of survival is what makes his job worthwhile. Not only to be able to hear that Julian's done so well, but to be able to see him today upright, running around, hearing the story about how he's been fishing, and he's keen to get back to find more parrotfish, makes the job all worthwhile. There are numerous cases of ships sinking and people getting lost in the sea, but Julian's case was of its own kind. Little Julian survived in the water for 6 hours. He fought with death and managed to stay alive. His life is a miracle, and today this kid is still going into the deep waters to fish. The incident that night didn't weaken him, but made him much stronger. That's a wrap for today. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up, share, and subscribe to the channel to see our latest content.